For years, people believed the truth was being hidden. Then one simple question was asked, and the answer was zero. Asterisk something felt different the moment the question was asked. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy. The room didn't erupt. No shouting, no chaos, just silence, the kind that makes people lean forward instead of checking their phones, because sometimes the most important moments aren't the ones filled with noise. They're the ones where the words land quietly and stay there. This exchange wasn't about shock value. It wasn't about viral clips. It wasn't even really about one name. It was about truth, evidence, and the uncomfortable gap between what people believe and what institutions can actually prove. For years, one case has lived at the center of public imagination, not just as a crime, but as a symbol. People projected their anger into it, their fear, their distrust, their belief that powerful people always escape consequences. And when a story becomes a symbol, facts often struggle to breathe. That's what made this moment different. The question was simple, almost painfully direct. According to the evidence held by federal investigators, how many additional people were charged in connection with that trafficking operation? The answer came back without hesitation. 0. No dramatic pause, no legal gymnastics. Just a flat statement, grounded in records, not rumors. That answer collided head-on with years of expectations. Because many people were told something very different. They were told a list existed. They were told names were hidden. They were told justice was waiting behind a curtain, and now suddenly the curtain was empty. That's not satisfying. It's not cinematic. It doesn't feel like closure, but it is how the legal system works. Investigations don't move on intuition or online certainty. They move on evidence that survives scrutiny. Evidence that can be challenged. Evidence that holds up in court. And when that evidence doesn't exist, institutions are required to say so. Even when people don't like the answer, that's the part many forget. Law enforcement is not allowed to confirm suspicions just because they feel right. They can't release names because the internet demands it. They can't accuse people to satisfy public pressure, because once that line is crossed, the system stops protecting anyone. The questioning didn't stop there. The focus shifted from the past to the present. A document had circulated. It carried a signature, it carried implications, and it carried enormous weight in public conversation. The claim was straightforward. The signature wasn't real. That changes everything, because forgery is not a political disagreement. It's a legal issue. If a document is falsely presented as authentic, especially one tied to criminal allegations, the obligation to investigate doesn't depend on popularity, ideology, or convenience. It depends on jurisdiction and law. That's what made the response matter. When asked whether an investigation could be opened based on a claim of forgery, the answer was clear. Yes. Not because of who the document involved, but because of what the allegation was. That distinction is crucial. It shows how institutions are supposed to function, not as tools of outrage, but as mechanisms of verification. Yet the deeper message of this exchange wasn't about one case or one document. It was about the environment we're living in now. A world where information moves faster than confirmation, where emotion spreads quicker than evidence, where repetition can feel like proof. Social platforms reward certainty, not accuracy. They amplify the loudest claims, not the most careful ones. And when people live inside that environment long enough, expectations change. They start to believe investigations should validate narratives instead of test them. They expect institutions to confirm what feels true rather than what can be proven. That's a dangerous shift, because once evidence becomes optional, accountability becomes impossible. The lawmaker speaking during this exchange touched on something many avoid acknowledging: extremes exist on all sides. Misinformation doesn't belong to one ideology. Violence doesn't come with a single label, and pretending otherwise only deepens division. The point wasn't to assign blame. It was to highlight consequences when false claims spread unchecked. They don't just distort conversations, they shape behavior. They push people toward anger, toward suspicion, Toward certainty without proof. And once that happens, trust erodes. Not just trust in leaders, trust in systems. Trust in reality itself. That's why this exchange mattered. It forced a moment of clarity in a space, usually dominated by performance. No grandstanding. No slogans. Just a confrontation between belief and evidence, and evidence doesn't bend. It doesn't adjust itself to comfort anyone. It doesn't rush to meet expectations. It exists or it doesn't. That's hard to accept in a culture trained to expect constant revelation, but it's necessary because the alternative is chaos. If institutions start naming people without proof, everyone becomes vulnerable. If allegations become verdicts, justice disappears. If outrage replaces process, the system collapses. This moment was a reminder of those boundaries. It didn't provide satisfaction. It didn't provide villains or heroes. It provided something. Rarer. Limits. Limits on what can be said. Limits on what can be charged. Limits on what power is allowed to do. Those limits protect everyone, even when they frustrate us. And that may be the most uncomfortable truth of all. We want accountability, but only when it targets the people we distrust. We want restraint, but only when it protects those we support. That's not how justice works. Justice doesn't pick sides. It sets standards. And those standards don't change based on trending topics or public mood. The final takeaway from this exchange isn't about disappointment. It's about responsibility. Responsibility to ask better questions. Responsibility to demand evidence, not confirmation. Responsibility to understand the difference between suspicion and proof. In an age of endless claims, restraint looks weak. But it's not. It's strength, because holding the line, especially when pressure builds, is what keeps institutions from becoming weapons. This moment didn't close a story. It clarified one, and clarity, even when uncomfortable, is the only path forward.